What happens when a country music icon walks onto one of daytime television's biggest stages, only to face disrespect, condescension, and a host who seems determined to tear her down? In just 25 seconds, one comment from Whoopi Goldberg would ignite a firestorm that turned a simple interview into an unforgettable battle of words, ending with Faith Hill doing something no guest had ever done before on The View. Faith Hill arrived at The View's studio that morning expecting a friendly conversation about her new music, her tour, and maybe some fun stories from her life with husband Tim McGraw. She was dressed elegantly, her smile warm and genuine as she walked out onto the stage. The audience cheered loudly, clearly excited to see the country superstar. She waved, took her seat, and settled in across from the panel. Whoopi Goldberg sat in the center, flanked by Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin. The energy seemed positive at first, with everyone exchanging pleasantries. "Welcome, welcome," Whoopi said, her tone casual but with an edge that Faith didn't quite catch at first. "So good to have you here. Thank you so much for having me," Faith replied, her southern accent soft and kind. "I'm really happy to be here." The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Sarah Haynes asked about Faith's upcoming tour, and Faith lit up talking about getting back on stage and connecting with her fans. Joy Behar chimed in with a joke about country music, and Faith laughed good-naturedly, playing along. Sunny Hostin asked about balancing family life with a demanding career, and Faith gave a thoughtful, heartfelt answer about making time for what matters most. Everything seemed fine, normal, just another celebrity interview on a talk show. But then Whoopi leaned forward, and the temperature in the room changed. "So, Faith," Whoopi began, her voice taking on a different tone, sharper somehow. "Let me ask you something. Country music, your world, it's pretty, let's say, limited in its perspective, isn't it?" Faith blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "I mean," Whoopi continued, waving her hand dismissively, "it's not exactly known for being inclusive or progressive. It's very, one note, very white bread America." The audience went quiet. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Faith's smile faded slightly, but she kept her composure. "Well, I wouldn't say that at all," Faith responded carefully. "Country music has a rich history and tells stories about real people and real lives. There's actually a lot of diversity in the genre if you really listen to it." Whoopi laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was dismissive, almost mocking. "Come on now, let's be real. It's not exactly speaking to everyone's experience, is it?" "Music is universal," Faith said, her voice still calm but with a hint of firmness now. "I think anyone can connect with stories about love, loss, family, struggle. That's what country music is about. That's what all good music is about." Joy Behar jumped in, perhaps trying to lighten the mood. "I think what Whoopi means is—" "I know what I mean," Whoopi interrupted, not taking her eyes off Faith. "I mean that your genre, your audience, it's very specific, very insulated. You're singing to people who think like you, look like you, believe what you believe." Faith straightened in her chair. "That's not true at all. I have fans from all walks of life, all backgrounds. Music brings people together. It doesn't divide them." "Does it, though?" Whoopi shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, country music has a pretty clear lane, and it doesn't venture outside of it very often. It's comfortable, safe, unchallenging." Sunny Hostin spoke up, her voice cautious. "I think there are country artists who are pushing boundaries and—" "Name 3, Whoopi said flatly, cutting Sunny off. The tension was thick now. Faith's jaw tightened. She had come here to promote her music, to have a conversation, not to defend her entire career and genre against someone who clearly had already made up their mind. "Whoopi, I respect your opinion," Faith said slowly, "but I don't think it's fair to paint an entire genre of music with such a broad brush. There are incredible artists doing incredible work, but you're not one of them, are you?" Whoopi said, and the audience gasped audibly. Faith stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You play it safe," Whoopi said, leaning back in her chair like she had just made an obvious point. "You make music that doesn't challenge anyone, doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. It's all very pleasant and nice and pretty, but does it actually say anything important?" Sarah Haynes looked horrified. "Whoopi, I don't think that's—" "Let her answer," Whoopi said, holding up a hand. Faith took a breath. She was clearly trying to maintain her composure, but her eyes were flashing now. "My music comes from my heart. I write and sing about things that matter to me, things that I hope resonate with other people. Just because it's not angry or political doesn't mean it's not important. So you admit it's not political, Whoopi said, pouncing on that. You stay away from anything controversial. I stay true to who I am, Faith replied, her voice rising slightly. I don't think artists need to be activists to be valid. I think we can just make music that makes people feel something, that brings them joy or comfort or helps them through hard times. Whoopi scoffed. That's very convenient. Convenient? Faith repeated, her eyebrows raised. Yes, convenient, Whoopi said. It's convenient to just make pretty songs and not take a stand on anything that matters. It's easy. It's safe. You get to be beloved by everyone because you never say anything that might upset anyone. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to intervene. I think Faith has every right to make the kind of music she wants to make without being criticized for. I'm not criticizing, Whoopi interrupted again. I'm just pointing out facts. Those aren't facts, Faith said, her voice stronger now. Those are your opinions, and they're based on assumptions you're making about me and my music without really knowing either. I know enough, Whoopi said dismissively. Do you? Faith challenged. Have you actually listened to my albums? Do you know what I write about? What stories I tell? Whoopi shrugged. I've heard enough. Clearly you haven't, Faith said. The audience murmured. Some people clapped. Faith was standing her ground now, no longer trying to be diplomatic. Joy Behar attempted to redirect. Let's talk about your new single, Faith. It's doing really well on the charts. But Whoopi wasn't done. The charts in your world? Maybe. But in the bigger picture, does it really matter? Faith stared at her in disbelief. Does it matter? My music matters to the people who listen to it. It matters to me. Isn't that enough? Not if you're not using your platform to say something meaningful, Whoopi said. Who are you to decide what's meaningful? Faith asked, and her voice had an edge now that hadn't been there before. Who are you to sit there and tell me that my work doesn't matter because it doesn't fit into your narrow definition of what's important? Oh, so now I'm narrow-minded. Whoopi said, sounding almost amused. You're the one who came out here and immediately dismissed everything I do, Faith said. You didn't ask me about my music. You didn't ask me about my creative process or what inspires me. You just attacked an entire genre and everyone in it, including me. Sunny Hostin nodded. She has a point, Whoopi. Whoopi waved her off. I'm just being honest. There's a difference between being honest and being rude, Faith said firmly. And right now, you're being rude. The audience erupted in applause. Whoopi looked surprised, almost offended that the audience was siding with the guest over her. Rude? Whoopi repeated. I'm asking legitimate questions. No, you're making judgments. Faith corrected. You've decided who I am and what my music is without actually knowing anything about it. That's not asking questions. That's being dismissive and disrespectful. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Alyssa looked shocked. Joy kept glancing between Faith and Whoopi like she was watching a tennis match. Sunny was nodding slightly, seeming to agree with Faith. I think you're being overly sensitive, Whoopi said, and I think you're being unnecessarily hostile, Faith shot back. I came here as a guest, to have a conversation, and you've done nothing but belittle me and my work since I sat down. That's not what I'm doing, Whoopi insisted. Then what are you doing? Faith asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you invited me here just to tear me down. Whoopi leaned forward. Maybe you're just not used to anyone questioning you. Maybe in your world, everyone just tells you how great you are, and you don't know how to handle it when someone doesn't. Faith laughed, but it was a laugh of disbelief. You think I've never faced criticism? You think I've gotten to where I am in this industry without working hard and dealing with people who doubted me? That's absurd. Is it? Whoopi challenged. Yes, it is, Faith said. I've been in this business for decades. I've earned my place. I don't need to justify myself to you or anyone else. Well, you're on my show, Whoopi said. So actually, you kind of do. The audience gasped again. That was a bridge too far, and everyone in the room knew it. Sarah Haynes' mouth dropped open. Joy Behar looked uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin shook her head. Alyssa looked down at her notes, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. Faith stood up slowly. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the mixture of anger and dignity in her expression. You know what? Faith said, her voice steady and clear. I don't need to sit here and be disrespected like this. I came here in good faith, no pun intended, to have a conversation. But this isn't a conversation. This is an ambush. and I'm not going to be part of it. Oh, come on, Whoopi said, waving her hand again. Don't be so dramatic. Dramatic? Faith repeated. You just told me my music doesn't matter. You told me I'm not challenging or important. You dismissed everything I've worked for my entire life. And now you're telling me I'm being dramatic for not wanting to sit here and take it? Whoopi shrugged. If the shoe fits. That was it. That was the final straw. Faith reached down, picked up her purse from beside her chair, and looked directly at Whoopi. This was a mistake, Faith said. Coming here was a mistake. I thought this would be a respectful conversation between professionals. But you've made it very clear that you have no respect for me or what I do, so I'm leaving. You're walking out? Whoopi said, and she actually sounded surprised now, like she hadn't expected Faith to actually do it. Yes, I'm walking out, Faith confirmed, because I value myself and my work too much to sit here and let you talk down to me. Sarah Haynes stood up. Faith, please, maybe we can. No, Faith said, but her tone with Sarah was kind. I appreciate you trying, but I'm done here. Joy Behar also stood. Can we take a commercial break and just… There's nothing to talk about, Faith said. She looked at Joy, Sarah, Sunny, and Alyssa. Thank you all for trying to make this work. I'm sorry it ended this way. Then she turned to Whoopi. And as for you, you should be ashamed of yourself. You have a platform that reaches millions of people, and you use it to tear others down. That says a lot more about you than it does about me. Whoopi's face hardened. I think you need to. I don't need to do anything. Faith interrupted, and her voice was strong and unwavering. I'm a guest on your show, not your punching bag, and I'm leaving. The audience started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder and louder. Some people stood up. The applause grew until it filled the entire studio. Faith gave a small nod of acknowledgement to the audience, hoisted her purse onto her shoulder, and walked off the stage with her head held high. The camera stayed on her as she walked, capturing every step of her dignified exit. You could hear Whoopi saying something in the background, but the applause drowned it out. The other hosts looked stunned, frozen in their seats. Sarah had tears in her eyes. Sunny's expression was a mixture of shock and what looked like admiration. Joy just stared after Faith with wide eyes. Alyssa sat perfectly still, like she was afraid to move. As Faith reached the edge of the stage and disappeared behind the curtain, the applause continued. The cameras cut to Whoopi, whose face was a mask of barely controlled anger. She clearly had not expected this. She had not expected her guest to stand up for herself so forcefully. She had not expected to lose control of her own show. Well, Whoopi said into the microphone, trying to regain her composure, I guess she couldn't handle a real conversation. But the audience wasn't having it. The applause had turned into a mixture of boos and shouts. People were yelling that Whoopi was wrong, that she had been disrespectful, that Faith was right to leave. It was chaos. Joy Behar grabbed her own microphone. I think we need to go to commercial. We're not going to commercial. Whoopi snapped. Whoopi, we should really, Sarah started. I said we're not going to commercial, Whoopi repeated, her voice sharp. Sunny Hostin spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Whoopi, you were out of line. She had every right to walk out. Out of line? Whoopi said, turning to Sunny. I was just asking questions. No, you were attacking her, Sunny said. There's a difference. I agree, Alyssa added quietly. It was really uncomfortable to watch. Whoopi looked around at her co-hosts, seeming to realize that they were not on her side. You're all being ridiculous. I was doing my job. Your job is to interview guests, not attack them, Joy said, and even she sounded frustrated now. That was not okay, Whoopi. The audience continued to make noise, and you could hear people shouting. Some were defending Whoopi, but most seemed to be on Faith's side. The energy in the room was electric, charged with the shock of what had just happened. We're taking a break. A producer's voice called from off-camera. Finally, Sarah muttered. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Whoopi's angry expression, the uncomfortable glances between the other hosts, and the agitated audience. Then the feed cut, but the moment was already out there. In that studio, in front of those cameras, Faith Hill had done something that felt almost revolutionary in the world of celebrity interviews. She had refused to be treated poorly. She had stood up for herself. She had walked away with her dignity intact. The conversation in the studio after the camera stopped was reportedly even more heated. According to people who were there, Whoopi tried to defend her approach, insisting that she was just being honest and direct. The other hosts pushed back, with Sunny being particularly vocal about how Whoopi had crossed a line. Sarah was apparently upset, feeling terrible that a guest had been treated so badly on a show she was part of. Joy tried to play mediator, suggesting that maybe everyone just needed to cool down. Alyssa stayed mostly quiet, still processing what she had witnessed. Back in her dressing room, Faith was surrounded by her team. Her publicist was on the phone, her manager was pacing, and Faith herself sat quietly, still processing what had just happened. She had walked out of television interviews before when they went wrong, but never like this. Never on such a public stage, with such a clear line drawn in the sand. "Are you okay?" her manager asked. Faith nodded. "I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm glad I did it. You were incredible out there." Her publicist said, holding the phone away from her ear for a moment. "Everyone is calling. Everyone wants to know what happened." "What happened is I got tired of being disrespected," Faith said simply. "I've worked too hard and come too far to sit there and let someone talk to me like that." Her team agreed wholeheartedly. They had watched the whole thing, and they had been just as shocked and angry as Faith was. The way Whoopi had come at her from the very beginning, the dismissiveness, the condescension, the outright rudeness, it was indefensible. Meanwhile, back on the set, the show was scrambling. They had lost their main guest. The interview had imploded spectacularly, and now they had to figure out how to fill the rest of the show. The producers were in crisis mode, trying to decide whether to address what had happened or just move on to other segments. When the show came back from commercial break, Whoopi's demeanor had changed slightly. She looked more composed, more controlled, but there was still a hardness in her eyes. "Well, that was interesting," she said to the camera, trying to sound casual. "Sometimes interviews don't go the way you expect them to." "That's putting it mildly," Joy said, and there was an edge to her voice. Sunny jumped in before Whoopi could respond. "I think we need to acknowledge that what just happened it was not okay. Faith Hill came here as our guest, and she deserved to be treated with respect." "I was respectful," Whoopi insisted. "No, you weren't," Sarah said softly but firmly. "You really weren't, Whoopi, and I think you know that." Whoopi's jaw tightened. You could see her trying to decide how to respond. She could double down and insist she was right, or she could back down and admit she had gone too far. For a long moment, she said nothing. Alyssa spoke up, her voice careful. "I think the audience saw what they saw, and the reaction in this room speaks for itself." The cameras panned to the audience, many of whom were still looking agitated and upset. Some people were shaking their heads. Some were still talking amongst themselves about what they had witnessed. "Fine," Whoopi said finally, and she sounded angry. "If everyone thinks I was wrong, then fine, but I stand by what I said. I think country music is limited, and I think artists like Faith Hill play it safe. That's my opinion, and I'm allowed to have it." "You're allowed to have your opinion," Sunny said, "but the way you expressed it was hostile and unfair. You didn't even give her a chance to really talk about her work. You just attacked her." "I didn't attack anyone," Whoopi said. "Whoopi," Joy said, sounding tired, "come on, you have to know how that looked, how it felt. Even from where we were sitting, it was uncomfortable." Whoopi crossed her arms. She clearly did not like being ganged up on by her own co-hosts, but they were not backing down. The dynamic on the panel had shifted, and everyone could feel it. "Moving on," Whoopi said abruptly, clearly wanting to end this conversation. But Sarah wasn't ready to move on. "I just want to say, for the record, that I have a lot of respect for Faith Hill for standing up for herself. It takes courage to walk away from a situation like that, especially on live television." The audience applauded loudly at that. Whoopi's expression darkened further. "Are you done?" Whoopi asked Sarah, her tone icy. "Yes," Sarah said, not backing down despite Whoopi's obvious anger. "I'm done." The rest of the show was awkward and tense. The hosts tried to get through their remaining segments, but the energy was off. Everyone was still thinking about what had happened. The audience was distracted. Even the crew seemed rattled. It was clear that Faith Hill's walkout had thrown the entire production into chaos. In the days that followed, the clip of Faith walking out would spread like wildfire across social media. People would analyze every word, every facial expression, every moment of the confrontation. Some would side with Whoopi, arguing that she was just being honest and that Faith overreacted. But the vast majority would side with Faith, praising her for refusing to be disrespected and for walking away with grace and dignity. But in that moment, in that studio, with the cameras still rolling and the audience still buzzing, The only thing that mattered was what had just happened. A country music icon had been pushed too far by a host who seemed to think her position gave her the right to belittle her guests. And instead of sitting there and taking it, Faith Hill had stood up, spoke her truth, and walked away. It was a moment that reminded everyone watching that respect is not optional. That having a platform comes with responsibility, that no one, no matter how famous or powerful, has the right to tear someone else down just because they can. And as Faith Hill walked out of that studio, head held high and dignity intact, she sent a message that would resonate far beyond that one interview. She showed that standing up for yourself is not dramatic or oversensitive. It's necessary, it's powerful, and sometimes it's exactly what needs to happen.